All right, good morning, everybody. Payson, are you good to go? Good morning, Payson. You guys good to go?
We are good.
All right, YouTube's up and good this morning? Fantastic. Okay. So we'll get this work session Tuesday, April 25th, 23 at 10 a.m. started, and we'll call to order Pledge of Allegiance. Supervisor Humphrey, you want to lead us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll start number 2, regular agenda items. 2A, information discussion regarding 24 Gila County budget requests and updates. Maren, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Klein. Good morning, Supervisor. There we go. Good morning, Supervisor Humphrey, Supervisor Christensen. A couple months ago, we came to you to talk about what your priorities are for the 2024 budget, and we've been working with Mr. Menlove and our department heads to find out what the needs are for 2024. So this morning, we wanted to bring you a summary of where we are in the budget process. This is a new work session this year, so feel free to offer feedback on what other information you'd like to see when we have these discussions in the future. I wanted to make sure that we brought you the information that we have. We have all but one department with their budgets completed and in the system right now. The department that's outstanding expects to be done by end of day Wednesday, which is fantastic. It shows that your department heads have really been responsive and engaged in the budget process this year. So we have here for you our resources and our limitations for next year. We wanted just to make sure that this information's out there both for you and for the general public. For 2024, the Economic Estimate Commission set our expenditure limitation at $50,068,759. And based on the assessor's valuations for 2024 tax year, we expect $1.82 million in property tax growth. Going back to that expenditure limitation briefly, that is a little more than $3.7 million more than the current year's limit. So that gives you additional budgetary capacity with which to invest in community initiatives and other county projects. For 2022, our ELR is currently under review. That's a later item this morning. And then over here on the right-hand side of the screen, we have our ELR exempt resources. Those are items that you can spend that are not included in that $50 million. So we subtract those off of our total expenditures to get down to the $50 million. That includes things like the American Rescue Plan Act, federal earmark money, and state appropriations. Under the American Rescue Plan Act, we have ongoing projects that you've already approved and additional things that we'll talk about here in a little while. For federal earmarks, there's about $3.5 million of projects that have been submitted to Senator Kelly and Senator Sinema. So we're building those into your 2024 budget. And under the state appropriations, there is $1 million for programming at the Pleasant Valley Veterans Retreat that is also built into your 2024 draft budget so far, but would also be excludable from the expenditure limitation cap, that $50 million.
So, Maren, I think, Steve, do you understand the expenditure limitation part of it?
No, it's pretty foggy to me.
Okay.
I don't know how you determine that number, who does that for you, and what is it limited to? Just capital improvements or?
So that is your total expenses less these exempt resources. So there are things that are not included in it. So let's start at the beginning. Back in 1979, the Economic Estimates Committee or Commission set these numbers based on how Arizona was growing. So that...
Mr. Chairman, could I give the
Sure,
the
please.
background history?
Absolutely.
So back in, as Maren said, back in the late 70s, California had done a very drastic and dramatic laws to limit growth in government. And they'd passed what was considered extremely extreme at that point in time. So in order for Arizona to ward off the extremities that California was passing at that time to limit government, it was voted into act and put into the Constitution of the state of Arizona, actually, what is called the expenditure limitation. And that, the whole purpose, the whole bottom line of it is to limit the growth in government, to limit the amount of revenues that local governments can utilize through taxation. So it's all limited that you can only have a certain 2% growth per year in spending that is based on spending from revenues of local tax sources. Those local tax sources are considered our county sales tax, excise taxes, property taxes, anything that's a tax that would be paid by local taxpayers. Okay. So limiting growth. Now, what Maren's talking about is that if we get revenues from outside of those, what would be considered directly local taxpayers, such as grants from the state of Arizona, grants from the federal government, actually growth in HERF tax dollars was excluded, that it's limited to what the HERF revenues were of Gila County in 1979, 1980. Anything beyond what the amount was then is excludable. So special revenues or revenues that come from outside of the county, outside of the local taxpayers, are excludable, which means that they don't count against our bottom line on how much we're spending of local tax dollars.
Okay, so I think I get that. Now, our budget, in my mind, seems as if we have about a third of our budget is tax money, and 2/3 is grants, HERF, and all the other. Okay, how close do we come to our expenditure limitation each year? Is there a big buffer in there?
So for 2021, there was. For 2022,
Go ahead and tell us what there was a buffer. What was that amount? Or I'm cutting ahead to what you have.
and you don't want to hear this number, for 2022, it was $618 because of how much we expended on post-fire flood relief that was not excludable yet because it wasn't a state declared emergency.
Well,
So-
that's a huge buffer.
No, it's historically,
$100.
historically, it's been closer to $3.5 or $4 million.
Yeah, okay.
2022, which we'll
Was uni-
talk about, it
Yep.
was unique. 2023, I ran a draft estimate yesterday. The draft estimate for 2023 is looking like it's about between 2.8 and 2.97 million as the buffer, but the buffer for 2022 it just is what it is. It largely because we have not expended all of the ARPA resources as of the end of 22. They were here, but we hadn't spent them yet.
All right,
So
that's,
now that I've ruined everyone's day,
no, that's very clear. I understand it now, much better, thanks.
and so you have, just so you have a perspective, the only other place you'll see this expenditure limitation, when we bring you the budget, we'll show you the total budget, and then we'll show you how many exclusions there are that get you to this $50 million, so you know that we are budgeting wisely and within that. In the past, the budgets ranged between 115 and 124 million, and staying within the expenditure limitation because of all the exclusions.
So James, what happens if we go over that limitation? What's the repercussions of that?
Repercussions are significant and
Okay.
costly to the county in that it starts out, if you go $1 over, there's a penalty that can be assessed to us by the state of $1. So we go over by $1, we can be fined, in essence, $1. As the more that we exceed the expenditure limitation, it's by statute that, or in the Constitution actually, that we can go up to, if we exceed it by a certain amount, that we can have to pay $5 for every $1 that we spend over the expenditure limit. So it can be 5 times
What you're over.
what we're over.
Yeah, that could add up fast.
So it's very punitive.
And that's part of why a couple years ago, when we decided to pay off the PSPRS obligation for our public safety pension, why we had to finance it and take out a bond backed with our pledged revenue instead of paying it out of cash reserves. Because of the expenditure limitation, Gila County is not able to use its cash reserves, which is an important thing for the three of you to be aware of when you look at projects coming forward. So now that I've burst everybody's bubble with where the 2022 expenditure limitation shook out, I will, I know Supervisor Christensen mentioned our revenue sources. I just wanted to put this up today so that we're all aware of what our general fund priorities are. So this is just general fund. This doesn't include any of our special revenue funds, but this is where the largest segments of your general fund expenditures go. So you've got 7% going to administration, about 50% goes to public safety and courts, 29% goes to health, welfare, education, constituent services, culture, and recreation. And what we mean by constituent services are county offices that provide direct services to county residents, such as the school superintendent's office, the recorder, elections, PubFid, things like that. And then you have 11% that is sanitation, highway, streets, and landfill. Again, this is just general fund. This doesn't include special revenue sources. And then we've got 3% debt service. So that's just so you gentlemen know where we have historically and where we expect the percentages to sort of come out in the future. In order for one of these to shift, it's like a $5 million change in the budget to change any of these percentages by more than like a quarter of a point. So these are pretty consistent year to year. So we wanted to look at what your capacity was to the expenditure limitation, look at the things that your departments have been requesting, just so that the three of you and county leadership and the public in general know what kind of capacity we have to do different things going into 2024. And this assumes that we'll use the entire capacity to the expenditure limitation. So in our first, we have 5 buckets here. The first is employees. The second is technology. And that would be ARPA-specific investments in technology. And then we have infrastructure and buildings, vehicles, and public safety. These seem to be the 5 largest categories for investment for 2024. And just about all the investment requests that we've seen to date are falling into these 5 buckets. So we have seen requests for additional staffing. We do know that with where the expenditure limitation is set for 2024, we have about just a little under $1.7 million available for investing in our employees. That's just how the math shakes out. If we were to look at the additional requests for staff that we've gotten so far in the budget process, they would cost about $416,000 of that $1.7 million, and that would leave you just over $1.2 million available for your existing staff. For technology, we've got several projects going that are being funded by American Rescue Plan Act for digitization and constituent accessibility. And those are things like community development, digitizing their records, and things like that. IT is working really well with the departments to fulfill the projects that you have authorized for that. For infrastructure and buildings, it's looking like there's about $2.2 million of infrastructure and building work needed in Payson. There's $2.78 million in requests for federal earmarks. Those would be excludable from your expenditure limitation. That's what the little asterisk there means. There is a $125,000 county match that would go with one of those earmarks. And we have seen, I've got $5.5 million here. It might be closer to 6 for roads projects that Homero and his team have planned for 2024. And any other infrastructure or building projects would likely be funded with ARPA funds. But those are the projects that we have seen so far in the capital requests. If there's others that you're aware of, please let us know. Over under vehicles, we have $500,000 that was allocated in 2023 of the American Rescue Plan Act funding. That item is coming before you on May 9th for a manufacturer's ordering window. So you will see that number again. You will see that item again. For now, it's here because that is part of the vehicle replacement plan going into this next year and coming out of this year. We have submitted a $720,000 request for an earmark request for vehicles, and that is 9 vehicles. It's 6 patrol and 3 transport, all for public safety. And then for 2024, the vehicle replacement plan that we have seen from the folks in fleet is $851,000. So those are the 3 big vehicle line items that will be coming to you. And then under public safety, we have numerous requests here, as you can see. There's $729,000 of requests for the jail, $374,800 in firearm upgrades. That includes a significant investment in night vision mounts. Of that security and technology item for the $1,093,839, there is $300,000, just over $300,000, that is being requested to upgrade the laptop computers in every patrol vehicle. That would be 51 machines, and the way that they attach to the console in the car so that every patrol officer has a computer there on site with them at all times. And that also includes the power converter so that they can run the laptop off the car. There's $60,000 in requests for the dive team. That $18,000 furniture request is for the task force trailer. And then we've received $73,000 in requests for safety upgrades for probation. So these are just items for you to be aware of and to discuss. And something that we would like your feedback on today and moving forward in the budget process. Historically, there's just been a dollar amount in the budget, and then each project, each item comes back to you to whether to go out to advertise for bids or to request proposals. Something that we would like you to consider for 2024 is us in finance, us in leadership, putting into the actual budget these specific items so that, for example, if in 2023 we had built into the budget $500,000 for vehicles, which we did, and at the time of bringing you the budget and publishing the budget, it specifically said, for example, to be used when an ordering window comes open from the manufacturer, that it would enable staff to have the authority already given by the Board of Supervisors to go ahead and place that order. But that's a big change. So we're bringing this to you today. We're about 2 months out from tentative budget adoption. We wanted to make sure there was plenty of time to discuss this, get your feedback, see if there are projects that you're willing to have us build into the budget that way or not. and to get your feedback as a team to let us know if that's something you would be willing to empower staff to do, or if you'd like to continue with the current model. Like I said, that $500,000 item is coming to you May 9th. So you have an idea of what the time frame is. It's coming to you May 9th. The ordering window is supposed to open June 12th. So here we are in April. We already know that we've got that lined out for you, but you did authorize that expenditure back in September. So we wanted to make sure that you have this information, that you can see that staff has been very detailed in their requests to finance to bring to the Board of Supervisors, that staff is working really hard to make sure that the information is out there. And then in addition to the items that you see here on the screen are our ongoing replacement plans that have set values every year. For example, our 5-year plan for replacing things in IT has the same dollar amount every year. So we didn't split those out here. These would be one-time investments or new investments that we haven't previously had. And all to say that these numbers are what we use to get to the 1.69 million available for investing in employees in 2024.
Supervisors, do one of you guys want to start before me?
I'll go. I like vehicles and things that we're we have a window that we have to order them, or we have to wait till next year on something like that. I don't have an issue with. But like, I don't know, the expense for firearms, just to go ahead and order, I would like more information on specific items, I guess, before I would be willing to just go ahead and put them in the budget, because I don't know the necessity. I don't know if it's a need or a want. And so there are items that I would probably not be willing to just say, go ahead and order it. But things that could be put off a year, like vehicles and things of that nature, and cost differences in a year, I would be willing to say, yeah, go ahead on specific items. But there are definitely some items that I would need a whole lot more information on before I say, yeah, go ahead and order.
Right. And that's why we brought it to work session.
Let's take a look at that.
Yeah. Okay, great. And I appreciate that feedback. And just to clarify on that, if there were specific funding available for a specific project, would that affect whether you wanted to visit, like, if, let's say we got a grant for, I don't know, for the dive team, for example.
Right.
Would that just?
Yeah, and my answer to that, well, you pretty much answered it, if there was a grant. Okay. And it would depend on where the funding source is coming from. Because when you say our budget, and some of this grant stuff isn't in our budget, and so I guess where the funding would come from would make a big difference on whether, I mean, if it's a grant for the dive team, sure, that's fine. It's not something that's coming out of our bottom line on our yearly budget. So, yeah, so the items necessary or needed or wanted would make a difference, and the funding source would make a difference for me.
Okay, great, thank you.
So, Maren, I think I understand what the changes are that you're trying to present. And I can see where if we were given the information ahead of the spending, like we're going to be approving the budget, and we know what's in there, that we wouldn't have to bring it up again and vote on it all over again. And so I can see where we could save a lot of time in our meetings and all of that, doing that. And so I don't have an issue with that, as long as when we approve the budget that we have been given enough information to know what we're approving ahead of time. Because the presenting, okay, we're budgeted to purchase these vehicles, and then we get the description of the vehicles, and and then we say yes. We don't really nitpick it too much. So It's like you guys don't bring the electric bill to us every month. That's just part of,
We could. The City of Globe goes through every bill every month.
yeah, see, that would be really tedious. So I can see where we wouldn't have to see and vote again on every item. Yeah.
Okay. And it's an idea to try to streamline things. Of course, we would follow, statutory requirements and work with the county attorney's office to make sure that everything was on the up and up, and that everything was, regardless, right, was authorized by the board appropriately, so that you are always aware of what's going on.
Go ahead, James, before I get started.
Okay. I believe what Marin is presenting here is all the requests. And so it's big, very vast, and very comprehensive. We only have limited dollars, and so all of this is going to have to be prioritized. And while we may have a 5-year plan that may include most all of this, it's not going to all be detailed and expected to be acquired or go through the purchasing process all in 1 year. So there's a prioritization process that we would all go through with you as a board, and to be able to identify what you might be comfortable in going forward with, which I think, Supervisor Humphrey, is what you were going towards. Being able to prioritize and what the need is it a need versus a want, and going through all of that to be able to identify that as part of the budgeting process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're good? Okay. So start with, how much ARPA money do we have available?
We have just over 2.2 not committed right now.
So it's just sitting there on the table?
It has projects in the pipeline to come to you.
Okay, so it's close to being committed.
It's not in danger of the federal clawback.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about employees. So what I got from you, Marin, is basically we have 1.2 that we could spend on our employees.
If you choose to create the positions that are being requested, yes.
And that would be in a way of like cost of living increase or something like that, James?
Mr. Chairman, I believe what Marin's referring to is that there have been positions requested of 1.2 million.
No, positions are
They're already funded.
14. The positions requested are 416. That leaves 1.28-ish available for existing staff.
Based on property tax increases, there's a total of like $1.6, $1.8 million in the general fund that we can utilize for giving salary adjustments to our employees. If we are going to, if any new positions are approved, that say it's 1.6 million, 1.8 million is reduced. And
To
so
1.2.
if you grant $400,000 of cost in new positions, then that reduces what can be done for existing employees.
Right,
And there's only 1.4, $1.2 million available.
yeah.
Which really eats up that resource to be able
right.
to take care of existing employees.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking at right here, is 1.277. But what I'm asking is, so the way I'm looking at it, if, and there's an if, we filled those requested positions that has been asked for, put out on the table, and it brought it down to 1.2, what would we do at that 1.2? Is that going to be like a 3% cost of living increase for our employees? I'm just throwing these numbers out to see what's being kicked around here.
So that's why we're here today. We're here for your ideas.
Mr. Chairman, just at 1.2 last year, $1.8 million, it is actually a little bit closer to $2 million that we did last year by a $2 per hour for all employees.
Mm-hmm.
That was for the general fund. It was close to $2 million that cost was.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we were to do this, just in reference to how that would have affected what we did last year, we would be looking at $1.25, like a $2,000 instead of a $4,000 annual increase for employees. It would have been $2,500
Mm-hmm.
that we could have adjusted employees. If we're looking at a 4% increase across the board for all employees, it would take that down to about 2.5%.
And that's what this money would be used for then, the 1.2 million.
Up to you, but potentially yes.
Well, I guess that's why we're here, right?
And-
Because you're wanting ideas of what you could just put in the budget and we're gonna go with.
And it's also to help you prioritize these other requests, right? Like knowing that that is the economy of scale for employee investments. You know, what would you like to see in the budget for capital? Are you comfortable with, you know, this 1.693 million that's would currently be available for employees, or would you like to see it be more and have us try to, you know, sort of curtail these lists or make these lists more about where special revenue funds come from, things like that, so that you can keep a balance between your priorities.
So, just so everybody knows where I'm at on this is my priorities is one, safety for the county, and secondly, our employees. That's where I'm at. And, you know, when it comes to some of this other stuff, we'll get to it. But our employees, I think, and right here on the deal, it's rightfully so, they're up first. So my thought is where are we going to go with our employees and how much money are we going to give to them this year? Because inflation is horrible. I know people are struggling, and I know it isn't enough money, but anything that we can see our way through to putting out there would be a help. I know that. So that's why I'm asking if this was to pan out the way Marin's got it on the board here, and we actually had $1.2 million sitting on this desk, what are we going to do with it as far as our employees go?
Mr. Chairman, my opinion, I believe is consistent with yours, that in this time frame where inflation is pretty rampant, that we cannot consider adding any new employees to have funding, taking out of that bucket of money to fund new FTEs. That it needs to go into whatever package that we can recommend and is adopted by the Board of Supervisors to get it into the pockets of our existing county employees. And that's all part of being able to retention and that. It's still a difficult thing for us to retain employees because we miss 1 year, we get further and further behind all the time. So that's my personal opinion.
So what I'm hearing from you, James, is instead of saying, okay, there's X amount of requests for positions, we scratch that and we take the 1.6 straight down to our existing employees and then do something with that just on, and in your idea, what would that be?
Mr. Chairman, I know that we did a flat dollar amount, $4,160 for every employee last year. I do believe that in an American economy that we cannot continue to do that exclusively, that we need to I'm going to pick on Jessica, but I'm not trying to pick on Jessica, that we have attorneys in our court system, the county attorney's office, that inflation, the way that we look at it in the economy is that inflation is that it's going up 3%, 4%. Inflation is actually 6 to 8%. And so we have to, in my opinion, that we have to look at a percentage. But then I also want to take into consideration that for our employees that are in the lower pay grades, that a 4% pay increase for someone that's making $30,000 a year is not much. And so I would look as a combination of 10 increase with a floor, so that we ensure that those that are in our lower pay grades are getting a certain amount, so that it is something that's meaningful in a paycheck to the very extent that we can, is what I have been thinking of for months and would like to put together to. in the near future bring to you.
So I know that our, you know, as a county, I see changes that's happening and whatnot. So are you saying that with the requested positions, we can live without those requested positions? Is that positions above what we have vacant, or, okay,
Those are requests for new positions.
brand new
general
position,
fund.
not just a vacant position somewhere?
Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, all the time as we go through a year, when we're looking at positions, if a department comes and says, well, I really need this, and my response at this point in time is that if that is the higher priority than what you've currently got, then you can reclassify within your existing structure. You can rewrite that job description to meet that specific need. So you have to identify, as a department, you have to identify what the absolutely essential, what the priorities are for positions, and then fill those positions according to the job description. If there's something that is a position that is currently being filled, that there's a higher priority, then take that position and rewrite the job description and fill it, but not to grow the employees.
Okay.
Meet what the current needs are by priority, but you have to adjust. And as things move around, which they always do, particularly in IT and different things like that, that the focus has to change. But we just simply cannot even consider, in my opinion, cannot consider adding new FTEs.
I don't disagree with that, James. And I think what we've done in the past, you know, I've seen you working with different departments where somebody gives up a position here and you put it over here, or whatever it is, or we can manage inside our departments to meet our needs. We have so far. Actually, I kind of wonder sometimes if we could even fill those positions if we wanted to. So there's always that part of it as well. So my priority is that. The second thing is LATCF funds, local tribal and constituency funds. Where are we at with that money? Is it wrapped up in here somewhere that we don't see, or
It's not included as part of this discussion. This is because this is what you can do sustainably, right? This is
right?
This is the request that we've gotten. That's not really open to department request at this point. That's
Right.
your.
But and I love work sessions, so you're right. Except that money can be spent for, like, on vehicles.
Sure.
Or other things like that.
If you gentlemen decide.
So, and I'm just asking, I'm just throwing it out here that, you know, is there ways of taking $500,000 out of that money and freeing up that to put somewhere else here, or taking money from that and spending $60,000 on the dive team? This is the questions I'm asking, because I don't see it.
Mr. Chairman, Marin's focus has been to spend the $10.5 million, and particularly in the last week that Congress did put forward, or the Senate, federal U.S. Senate, put forward a bill to claw back, as Marin referred to it, take back that $10.5 million that we were appropriated. And so our focus all along has been to bring to you projects and one-time spending that obligated all of that $10.5 million, and we're real close there, as Marin has said. When we get past that $10.5 million, all of that's committed, and the board has approved those projects, one-time spending, then we'll go into the $12 million of LATCF funds.
And just part of, well, the main priority today was to show you the capacity that you have in the 2024 budget of ongoing funding sources as limited by the expenditure limitation that would allow you to invest in employees while still doing these other things. You can absolutely reprioritize it, change where you'd like funding to come from. It's your work session, but we had to give you something to start with, or we were all just going to like, what?
No, Marin, you did outstanding. This is great. Go ahead, James.
Mr. Chairman, I will say that there are a couple of things that we use general fund dollars for. that in order to not deplete our HERF and our transportation excise tax, there's like actually closer to $4 million match for the Tunnel Creek Bridge. And rather than use all of our public works funds for that $4 million match, we had agreed and had brought to the board of using for half of that match general fund dollars. So to make sure we restored our reserves and those kinds of things, we do intend to use some of the $12 million to make sure and restore our fund balances for projects that we've done like that in the last few years, particularly in like what Marin had mentioned as well, of the dollars that we had to use in responding to the flooding and fires and things like that, to make sure that our financial house is in complete order, based on where we're at from our responses to emergencies.
So I wish Tomero was still in here, but I think he stepped out. I had an interesting conversation last week on some roads, the Control Road and the 512 Road. And so when it comes to money and stuff like that, if he comes back in here, I'll ask him. But anyway, I agree with what Tim said about the $500,000. And we do have that window, that purchase window that we have to work with. You know, I'm kind of curious if there'll ever come a time when we can skip a year of buying vehicles, so. And then also the 720,000 in earmarks, was that specific vehicles for that, Marin, or?
There were specific requests that were submitted to Senator Sinema's earmark and Senator Kelly's earmark. We won't know until September whether we get the funding or not.
But they were for like specific vehicles?
Mr. Chairman, when the Sheriff's Office, I requested for public safety, requested from the Sheriff's Office of what vehicles would they need to have replaced so we could submit it as an earmark from Congress. And there were specifically 6 patrol vehicles and specifically 3 transport vehicles that, through our formula and how we process and determine if a vehicle should be replaced, there were 9 total vehicles specifically identified that needed to be replaced that were submitted to Congress. We won't know on that funding until December, next March.
So we have 500,000 that we pretty much, I think, are looking at the right way of doing it and buying vehicles when the window opens.
So that'll come to you on May 9th.
May 9th, okay. And so then in addition to that, we have $851,000 funding for the 2014 budget.
That is what Fleet has identified as the highest priority vehicles that need replacement. And that assumes that these other two, that the 500,000 and the 720 occur. So the list reprioritizes if for some reason either of those doesn't happen.
Okay, so I see that this is just going to be a working progress on this.
Mr. Chairman, I will identify the $851,000 identified there is non-patrol vehicles.
Yes.
Okay.
We split them up of all our vehicles in the fleet of public safety patrol, emergency vehicles, and then all others, non-emergency vehicles.
Okay.
Those are all non-patrol, non-sheriff's office. Well, there could be some, but non-patrol.
There's 16 vehicles on that list that we have. And when I mentioned potentially bringing you a list with the budget that you would approve, right now what I've got built into the finance system is that list of vehicles with the justification sheet from Fleet, where you could look at that and say, okay, new vehicle is going to replace this vehicle that's in the fleet, and so on and so forth down the list. So you see the total that adds up to that 851. So that level of detail is being maintained currently, and hopefully something we'll do in the future. And regardless of how you want to see it in the budget we publish, that's our target in finance going forward, so that if somebody comes to us this time next year and says, well, I want to do this, and we can say, well, here's the list we had a year ago and that's not on there. So that that we're all on the same page with the same information, and communications clearer.
Go ahead, James.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I did want to add on the 861,000 vehicles it was 16 vehicles new. That is, it would be replacing or getting rid of 18 vehicles.
Oh, that's,
So we're looking at
Right.
the usage of vehicles, and in this case, we could trade in two incidents, trade 2 vehicles for 1 new one. So
Okay.
we would be reducing the fleet by 2.
Okay, no, I just took that for granted, James, because that's what we've done in the past, basically. So let me ask you another question, Maren, and there again, I wish Homero was here, but 5.5 million in roads, is that road specific or is there equipment involved in that?
those are specific roads projects that Homero and his team have identified. It includes things like Gila and Stagecoach, and 2
Gila?
million, he said Gila Road.
Didn't we fund that already before?
It was supposed to be done 2 years ago, and it has not been done as of yet. So yeah, we had money for it 2 years ago, and it still hasn't been done. So I think I don't know, but
We funded the engineering.
No,
no. Well, the road was supposed to have been done before you even took place, because I remember at one of my meetings I told him it would be done in spring of that year, and that was almost 2 years ago. And so why it didn't get done, I don't know, but that's one of the things that I met on, and it's like, okay, we approved the funding. I told the public it was going to happen. It didn't happen. Where's the money? Oh, the money didn't go away. Oh, well, then let's spend it because that road needs to be done.
But you still have to do that within your expenditure limitation.
Yeah, I just wish it had been done,
2 years ago.
and then we would have that much less to deal with, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, because even if it's not general fund dollars,
Yes.
you have to do it within your expenditure limitation. And one of the clarifications on that particular road is, if I understood what I jotted down from my notes with Homero, that it needs to be chip sealed or gravel. It can't be paved, because if you pave it, that changes the engineering and creates a whole bunch of additional expenditures that we have to then invest in.
Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it to pave that mile or half a mile, whatever it was?
It's 1.7 miles.
1.7?
Yeah, 1.2. And we did the bottom of it, the first half
Was paved.
was well, I don't know if it was paved or double chip sealed. It might have been paved, but it wasn't engineered, and so that's why we're going to chip seal and things now. We're getting way off of the budget here.
No, we're good. We're still in the middle of roads right here.
But anyway, yeah, because it wasn't engineered properly when it was paved. And I think due to the county engineers that worked for us at that time now went back to work for the state. That's not helping us any, but I said that. Anyway, because with a 30-foot trailer, you can't keep your truck and trailer on that road. Believe me, I pulled a 20-foot trailer in there over the weekend, and I was off the road on some of those corners. So that's why from now on, if we pave anything, it's got to be an engineered road. And if we're not going to engineer it, then it needs to be chip sealed.
Well, and Homer's always been preaching.
No, Homero's here. So anyway, yeah, I can't answer the questions. I just know the history.
So let me back up a little bit, Homero, because when I'm looking at vehicles are one thing, but what I asked about a couple things in your department, but the $5.5 million is just roads. There's no equipment in there. So are you not purchasing some equipment this year?
Yes, we are. And we are one organization that is not.
Yeah, you gotta be on it.
If you want to
Good morning. Don't have all my reading glasses here with me, so I was trying to read the screen. We have equipment we're gonna purchase, and we're the one organization that actually had not submitted a final version of our budget. And we're working on that, and we would like to, of course, take time to share that with the board sometime in the near future. But we got various pieces of equipment that we're planning on buying. Rollers behind the motor graders is one of them. Some equipment for the skid steer that allows us to patch pavement to cut out the pavement, grind it out, mill it out, and actually repatch without having to saw cut asphalt. We are planning on buying, we have one 10-wheel dump truck that we can't find an engine for it that we'd like to replace. We're not planning on buying a motor grader this year. But we have a lot of equipment that we're going to buy. I think it's in the $1 million range of equipment. $800,000 is what my memory tells me.
Okay, so I was curious because I figured you had some stuff you were gonna buy. We got off on the Gila Road that, like me and Tim was talking about, should have been done 2 years ago. So
Half ago.
Okay.
we had a good discussion in Young the other day on trucking and stuff like that. Or is any of that in that road 5.5?
If it's the repair of a gravel road that doesn't show up in capital, that's on one of our line items for buying, for the use of our hourly employees and the use of our equipment. In terms of a Gila, we would be buying some material to amend the gravel road, but that's not considered a capital project. That comes up out of our expenses on the budget.
Okay.
Can I, this is expenditures that are subject to the expenditure limitation report. And one thing that the excise tax, I don't know how it can be, but the Auditor General has ruled that the excise tax revenues and expenditures for that are subject to the expenditure limit. And so this would be money spent out of HERF money, a good portion of it is excludable, but the excise tax, if we use it for project, you have to manipulate and really watch how you spend it to have it be excludable. But generally the excise tax, a lot of that is not excludable. And that's why it's subject to the expenditure limit.
And that's what's in that 5.5 million is excise tax? Is that the extent of our excise tax? 5.5?
I believe so, yes.
That's the extent of roads projects that would be subject to the expenditure limitation. There are plenty of things that Homero and his team will be doing or will be asking to do next year that are not part of that $50 million limit set for us by the state. Those just, we subtract them straight out of the total expenditures. So this set of information on the screen is things that are specifically subject to the expenditure limitation, or where there's items that are items that that just needed to be part of the conversation today. Homero and his team do a really excellent job of making sure that 90% of what they do is, especially with roads and things like that, are excludable from the expenditure limitation. And that's not a calculation we expect them to do, but that is something that we go through with the Auditor General every year. So those capital purchases of equipment that Homero was referring to, some of the larger infrastructure investments would not be part of that. But like, for example, in the 2.78 million in earmarks, that includes like the 512 road, like you mentioned. But in order to have the county match for that, the 12.5%, we needed to mention that so that you know that 125,000 is subject to the $50 million limitation.
Okay.
It's like a big tumbleweed,
Yes.
and you need a flamethrower.
It is a lot to get your mind wrapped around. I agree. And so,
Aren't you glad I get to do it and not you?
yes, ma'am, I sure am. That's why I just asked you if we have any money. Tim, you have anything else, or Steve, for any of this?
I just have one question, and I, on the positions, it seems to me that in the past there are quite a few positions out there that are not filled.
Correct.
And I guess I'm kind of wondering how many of those positions have not been filled over the years and may never get filled. And so that's, I don't need the answer today, but I'm just looking, is that if we have departments that have like position for 10 employees, but we've been operating with 5 for the last 4 years. Could those positions available be changed over to help us put more money in what we can do for employees that we have now? And I'm not saying that there is any, but I'm just saying if that is an issue, could that be changed around?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Humphrey, that's exactly what we did. We based our increase last year on what was available and allocated that to the current employees. So the actual budgeted increase of $2,160 or $4,160 last year was spread across the entire budget. But in calculating what was available, it was just to existing employees and how much would it cost to give the existing employees that. So I guess in a long-winded way, in answering your question, that is exactly how we have allocated salary increases based on actual employees, not necessarily on budgeted employees.
Okay, but I guess my question is, are we budgeted for employees that we don't have and will never have?
That is a good question.
I don't need it answered today. just something
Mr. Chairman,
I was curious about.
Supervisor Humphrey, just in the last several years, we have reduced the general fund employees by about 25 employees. So that is something that we continue to look at, and Marin is always going through that and examining long-term vacant positions. And in reducing over the last few years, 25 employees is significant.
And
it's millions of dollars.
right, and in no way am I asking any of our departments to do more with less. That's not my question or my intention here at all, because I think that there are some of our departments that do need more employees and more education and things for their employees. I'm just saying from past history, if we have employees on the books or open positions on the books that we may never fill. That was just something that I was wondering if we could look at to see if it's not something that we could use to help our existing employees.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Humphrey, we are doing that constantly.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to continue that discussion. So, I think most of the vacant positions in each department, the department would actually like to fill those because they probably feel like they don't have enough, but then we really struggle with filling them. As far as adding more positions, I think I agree with everyone else that unless it's just of the utmost necessity, what are we talking about? 10 positions here or 12 positions approximately?
It's 6.
6. So, and you haven't identified what those 6 are, and I don't necessarily need to know. But if they're absolutely necessary, then I think we should consider that. But on the other hand, we're growing our government again, and I agree that we should not be doing that without at least a lot of thought. And James, you'd mentioned trying to sort of reallocate duties and things like that, because I know it's been mentioned to me that we're seeking a FTE at TCM. Oh, I used 2 3-letter identifiers in one sentence.
Yeah, sort that one out.
So, and
That's what-
that's a position, that's one of the 6. It's a new building, it's a position that may be needed or is needed, whereas I don't know how much the other 5 positions are needed. I can't make a judgment on that because I don't know what they are. But I agree with Woody, we need to really look at supporting our existing employees that we have.
Well, but I think maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but we have vacant positions that are not being used. So if somebody isn't going to use those, that position could be moved, let's say, to the fairgrounds for a coordinator, right? Or it could be used to be moved to TCM for whatever we're gonna do there. So I think we still have room to move in the county as far as positions go without just 6 brand-new positions, right? So then really, I think we're back to what you said originally. We can take that 1.6, almost 1.7 million, and help our people out that we have and get through the year a little easier.
Mr. Chairman, if I could back up on, if you're cutting positions, prior to my arrival in Gila County, must have been back in 2013, 2014, 15, something like that, that Gila County went through a time where, and this is the easy way to do it from an administrative point of view, that there was a directive that was given that every department has to cut 10%. And so even a very small department like Ms. Porch or Eric has got 3 employees that you've got to cut 10% from your budget. And so they did that 2 years ago. 15. I don't believe that you, as a board, would support that we need to do things more surgically. And that, as Supervisor Humphrey, as you've said, that looking at positions that have been vacant, can we surgically and pinpoint specific positions that haven't been filled forever, and it's been so long that duties have been reassigned, and to fill that position at this point is not necessary, which I believe is what you've said, Supervisor Humphrey. And so can we just eliminate that position and better utilize that position elsewhere with that as we change as a county that has a different, better use than where it exists? So absolutely.
Yes, like Pleasant Valley Veterans, TCM, the fairgrounds, we've created those new venues for additional employees. So that identifies 3 in my mind. I don't know what the other 3 are, but
To be clear,
Yeah.
the fairgrounds and Pleasant Valley Veterans Retreat have had positions created in the budget for the past 2 years. Those are not included in these 6.
okay.
6 are new for '24.
So the board is creating new demands for employees. So we have to have some flexibility in adding those, in my opinion, but not recklessly. I don't think any of us want that. And we want the number as large as we can get. And so how do we do that? And so the discussion comes to, can we use money budgeted already for unused positions? And if we can, that'd be a great way to go.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm still not quite done here. So on technology, where it's ARPA only, constituent accessibility, what are we talking about there?
That is where digitization is. It's just there so that you know it's an investment that you're making and will be continuing to make. It's not a plug-and-play solution. It takes a long time for IT and the individual departments to gather the resources and the information to go ahead and get digitized. So it is ongoing, and the vast majority of it is to improve constituent access to information while improving workflow for existing staff. So things go faster, more efficiently, more accurately, and so that if a constituent needs information, they will in the future be able to do some of the research themselves and be better able to avail themselves of our existing data as opposed to having to submit a request and then wait while staff researches it. So those are the kinds of things that are there. During the current budget year, you authorized $1.5 million for station and $500,000 for hardware to back that up. And there are a couple of other projects that fall under digitization, not just paper records getting digitized, but things of that nature.
Okay.
So this is an ongoing investment you're making, just so that the information is there that across these priorities, that's one of the things you're doing.
Well, that's cool. Okay. The only other thing I would say, and that goes back to public safety, and if Jessica could ever figure out how we could spend druggies' money when we bust them, that would be even better. So I have a big interest in helping the task force, however that can be. We've operated on a shoestring task force that has done a remarkable job for the amount of people that's in there. And if there was ever a way going forward that there was a way to help beef that up, I'm behind it. And if Jessica, like I said, could make it to where we could spend those druggies' money, I'm even happier. So, okay.
There's some state level issues, but we'll chat about it.
And if there's state level issues, maybe that's a discussion for lobbyists and stuff that we could start working on as well. What I've come to learn is some of these things that we address, it is state that kind of the problem. I'm not so sure, but for the last 6 years, we haven't kind of dropped the ball on that, where we should be down there beating on those legislatures' desks saying, this needs fixed, or that needs fixed. And so, going forward, maybe we can do that. You guys have any more on this list of stuff, or have we beat it up good enough?
I'm fine.
Okay, Maren, what we got?
Okay, so based on your feedback today and working with Mr. Menlove, we'll come back to you probably at our work session in May with an update based on what we've talked about today.
Good.
So that you have ongoing knowledge of how our conversation's going.
So we'll move on to B. Do we need to spend any time on B, or have we kind of...
I think we already took B to the woodshed.
Okay, let's go to C.
C was a placeholder for A, so we're good on that too.
C is good?
Yep, so
Hey, we're cruising now.
we can move to D, that would be good.
Okay, and this is information discussion regarding the fiscal year 22 audit update. Maren?
Yes. So, as Mr. Menlove mentioned at our meeting last week, the 2022 Gila County audit was published on time for the first time in 10 years. We did get our findings from the Auditor General's office, and I just wanted to make sure that the three of you are aware that the Auditor General's office is being especially scrutinous of credit card purchases. They call them P-card purchases in the audit report. They are making sure that every transaction has a justified business purchase, business purpose, that all the documentation is attached, and they are identifying areas of additional scrutiny that they've let us know. So last week, our department was made aware of, for example, the Auditor General's office on any credit card transaction over $5,000. They want to make sure that there are 3 quotes attached to the credit card transaction. So we've made sure in our system that that's possible, and we have reached out to the departments and made sure that they're aware, and finance staff is doing an internal audit now to identify all those transactions fiscal year to date to make sure that we are in compliance with that additional scrutiny that we were just made aware of last Wednesday. Our policy states that you have to have that documentation. Policy had not previously stated that it had to be attached in the credit card system. So we're working with staff to make sure that that gets approved or improved, and that we get that taken care of going forward. The other findings are ongoing things that we've been working on improving for the past several years. We just wanted to make sure that you were aware of these findings. So the credit card finding does specify that there were, for 2022, there were $36,000 in transactions that didn't meet the auditor's level of documentation. So we are working on improving that. We knew that that would be a problem, that we had come to staff a year ago, March, and identified that those were issues. So that was a total of 33 transactions according to the auditor's office, and we have been working with staff to improve those. We are also currently working with staff to do a capital asset inventory. Staff is about 50% done with that. We have 9 departments that are fully compliant at this time. So if you hear grumblings from department heads that finance is driving people crazy, that's why. It hasn't been done to the extent that the auditor has wanted it done since 2017. So we expect that the current one will have some room for improvement, but we are currently working with all departments to get a current and accurate inventory asset list of what they have and make sure that it matches what's in our system. We are working with IT to ensure that all of our IT policies, procedures, and access points are in compliance with the Auditor General's office. They have some specific items that they noted that we have already improved and resolved. They just were not improved and resolved as of June of 2022. So when you read the audit report, please be aware that you're time traveling back about 10 months. And they do have a couple of items on our grants for 2022 that we have already identified and improved in 2023. But the auditor, again, time traveling, they have an obligation to report as of 6/30 of 22. So they are things we have improved, but you will see them in the audit report as being unresolved. So we wanted to make sure that we brought those to you today. And then staff and I will be working with our software company. There were a couple of items that the Auditor General's office brought up as just, they call them verbal findings, where they just tell you, hey, you should improve this. So we're going to work with our software company to see if we can't come up with some improvements that would better meet those needs. And if we can, great, we'll implement them. If not, then we will have documented for the auditor's office that we took their advice seriously and we looked into it, and that we are maintaining that. So the key one for your use is the credit cards. And we did just complete that internal audit where both elected officials and regular department heads had transactions identified, whether they were compliant or not. And staff has reached out and worked to resolve that. And we really appreciate everybody's responsiveness and willingness to help us be as compliant as possible. And we couldn't do it without your support and without Mr. Menlove's support. So thank you.
Thank you, Maren. Questions for Maren? Tim?
I guess there is a question. With our world getting out of COVID and fire and floods, that should help your world in the audits a little bit going forward, shouldn't it? Without all of that excess funding flowing through our county?
It will shift the focus of scrutiny to smaller programs. So when they look at our total list of grants, they take 40% of the total dollars of grant money that we've received. And that 40% identifies how many dollars they have to evaluate. Then they look at the risk factors associated with each program and choose programs based on that. So after all of ARPA and LATCF are fully evaluated, and potentially the post-fire flood funding, because some of that came through DEMA and other federal agencies, they will then begin to scrutinize smaller grants more closely. So we are working with all our departments to make sure that all of our documentation, whether it's a $500 grant or a $12 million grant, that documentation is there, because we don't know until the fiscal year is over who's going to get audited. And a couple years ago, the auditor's office before COVID, walked into one of our departments, picked up a file folder that looked like this, said, oh, that first page isn't the page we want, and failed it. That first page was 2 pages further back. And they refused to accept that it was correct because it wasn't in their order of papers. So the scrutiny is scrutinous.
I'm glad I asked that question to give you a purpose to vent.
Hey, well, but you know, like your office and said, "Oh, hey, one line out of where we would expect it on that art."
Okay, we'll try to create some chaos so there's
Yes.
less scrutiny
Yeah,
on the paperwork that you provide in the folder.
Yeah, it works the exact opposite of what you
Well,
expect.
okay, our goal for next year is create a lot of chaos, so
Mm-hmm.
you won't be scrutinized on the little stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Tell Congress that's what we want. All the chaos.
Steve?
No. They
I don't have any questions, but I do want to say thank you and your staff and everyone involved for coming up with the first audit, like you said, in 10 years that went through very well, smoothly. That's a really high achievement, I think. Given the scrutiny that they're put under, it's almost like you're guaranteed to fail on something. But it's just an honor to be able to serve with such great people.
Thank you. And it is a credit to everyone here at Gila County. Every single employee doing their job well every day is what allows us to have that achievement. So thank you for leading that.
Mr. Chair, if I could too, I'd like to thank staff and Mr. O'Driscoll, Mr. Minlove for having more of these work sessions to allow us to open these can of worms. I very much appreciate it, and thank you very much for the effort taken to allow us to dig into these a little deeper. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have a long list of them, Tim. So, Marin, thank you. Yeah, you guys have been awesome. And it seems like the better we get with our audits, the deeper they dive into them.
Yes.
So, I mean,
They have to justify their existence.
I don't get it, but that works. So thank you so much.
You bet. So we'll be back next month. We have some technology updates to bring you next month. And then based on today's feedback, I will have more information on the 2024 budget so that you have more information well in advance of our June 20th, that will set the expenditure limitation for the year for 2024 and adopt a tentative budget. Thank
Cool.
you.
James?
Mr. Chairman, express appreciation to Mayor and team for all the work they've already done on the budget. They still have significant commitments of time and energy to pull it through to the red flag or the white tape, whatever they have at the finish line. As you go through, as you have consideration, please ask questions of Marin and her team. Going through the detail there, it's voluminous. It's all electronic, thankfully, at this point, or 98% electronic. But I know that Marin and her team would be glad to walk through that detail to every extent that you would like to look at the lists of who the people are, what the positions are, and what's budgeted by department. And so we can, and look at the detail of how many positions are there that may not have been filled for quite some time. So we have that detail, we look at it, and would be glad to sit down as you have time available to be able to go through that. I do trust Marin and what she does. I know that she is putting together, based on your direction, a budget and following everything, and that's why this discussion is good for her, so she can take what you have and thoughts, recommendations, any considerations you want us to include. I know Marin takes that seriously. She takes notes of everything, and she, more than just take notes, she takes it to heart and puts that into practice and into effect in what she does. So please, just because we have a work session, continue with the thoughts and anything that you might want to include from Marin. She takes it serious. And that's why we're caught up and other things like that. She does take it serious and does a great job.
She does. And Marin, we do thank you for that. You got a good department, and we've come a long ways. So we're doing good.
We have. It's a privilege.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to 2E, information discussion regarding Gila County-owned parcels of land, and that's under me. And I brought this up basically starting with in my district. Sometime in the past, Supervisor Dawson had went and purchased some properties in Winkleman and Hayden area. I really don't know what her intent was or what she had planned for the properties. I believe maybe even some, our folks may have went down there and cleaned them up at the time, some of them. But this is the start of it, and there is, and we'll start there and work north, but there's, I think there's 7. 4, yeah, there's 7. So this is the old laundromat that's in Hayden, the top one right there. It's boarded up. I've never even looked at the inside of it. Just to the, up the street from it right there's an old burned out cafe. It's pretty tough. That neighborhood's pretty tough. What she had in mind for that building, I mean, it's kind of a cool building. It's that old stone type building, but there it sits. And so that, for one, was one of them I wanted to bring up with these others to get us to thinking about, are we going to do something with them, or should we try and get rid of them? Whatever it is, because I don't see a need for a lot of them. So you want to go to the next one? There again, this one right here is in Hayden as well. The problem is that there's a vacant lot or whatever anywhere in that neighborhood, chances are it's going to start getting trashed up again. And there again, it's another lot that I have no idea why it was purchased. Next. Same with this one. Me and Kathy, when we went down there and looked for these areas, these properties that we own, we're driving around through there, and pretty tough neighborhoods. I mean, and not only that, you're driving through the smoke of burned out buildings that just caught fire the day before or something. There's a bad problem with folks going around there, and I think it's a homeless issue, druggy issue, and they were burning these places down quite frequently. And so this is another one. Next. This one was fairly clean when we looked at it. Nothing really there. I don't know anything about infrastructure or anything like that. That would be there, but anyway, it's there. Next. Same goes with this one here, and that was kind of on a slope too, a little bit. And these are all in Hayden. Next. Here's one. I don't know the actual physical condition of that structure now. I don't know if it's still standing or not. We haven't looked at that one lately, so it may not even be there. But anyway, it's 063. One more. No, you missed. Right there. That's the one. Anyway, so it's hard to say, but it's there. All of these are just basically lots. They're small in size. Okay, on to that next one. No, go again. Is there another one? Back up with the metal building where it shows the metal, right there. This is a lot in Winkleman, and the city of Winkleman is using it as a storage area for some of their road department stuff. My idea is to somehow give that over to the town of Winkleman. So, and they can just continue using it. It's right against their road department, their lot right there in town. So that's the properties that Gila County owns in Winkleman and Hayden. I know in the past there was a little bit more interest in the Hayden area, like I can't think of that guy's name, but he is buying up some different properties, you know, and like the old laundromat might be an option. Somebody like him might be interested in getting, I don't know, but they've sat there long enough that I don't see a need for Gila County to ever warrant needing any of those.
The laundromat is on the Copper Quarter Blackbuster list for a second assessment, so it can be remediated and sold.
That would help. Yeah, that would help if that's the case. So I wanted to bring that to your guys' attention. The other thing I also wanted to talk about is we still own 27 acres along 260 in Payson. So I'm just throwing all this out there on the table to see what the discussions were on these properties. Supervisor Humphrey?
Well, I guess my first question is, do we own any other properties in other districts?
Well, I don't know.
I guess that's something that we're gonna have to look into. And that's something I will when I get some new help, but, yeah, cause I didn't realize that we could just go buy property. I didn't.
Well, I don't know if we could today, but it happened back then.
Yeah, cause I don't know that we need to be in the real estate business. But if we own them outright, you know, blight has always been one of my pet peeves, and that's a work session sometime, Mr. O'Driscoll, is on properties that that there's no known owner, either they've passed away or someone has the tax lien on that property, and they're not foreclosing on the property, because a lot of those large companies buy up all of our tax lien property and then they don't foreclose upon it, which creates a blight problem for us. So that's something I'd like to look at sometime. But because where I'm at is if someone's paying taxes on those properties to keep them from being sold, they ought to be responsible for them. And with that frame of mind, if we own these, in my opinion, we're responsible to maybe clean them up, or at least make them safe, or something. And you know, whether we did that with a clean and lean, to where we try to clean them up and sell them prior to. But there again, you know, some of these properties, I don't know what they might be worth, but they're, in my opinion, they'd be our responsibility to clean them up.
So,
But and they would have value to someone, I would believe.
it's hard to say down there, Tim. It's a pretty tough neighborhood. I mean, you're basically packing a map in one hand and your pistol in the other one to go find these. It's not, so I don't know if we'll find the owners that want to live down there that want to pay money for a place. But needless to say, we own them. So I just throwing this out there that I personally don't think Gila County should own these properties at all.
Well, if we quit paying the taxes on them, they'll go up for tax lien, I would imagine.
We could do that, huh?
That's what a lot of people have done, just walked away from them, quit paying taxes on them, and pretty soon they go up for a tax lien sale.
Maybe that's how we got them. Other than the 20 acres, I would agree the Hayden and Winkleman properties are almost worthless.
But excuse me, man. I want to bring up a situation too. Not long after we got into office, you know, out of the blue, we come to realize we own a house over here in Midland City. I had no idea we owned a house over there in Midland City.
Well,
So you could be
because I didn't know we did either.
You did at one time. So there could be other hidden stuff, Steve.
Yeah, so the one in Winkleman, I wouldn't mind giving it to the town of Winkleman. That you know. But the other ones, I think we need to just go to silent bid or whatever and let them get back on the tax rolls.
Well, if Kathy's gonna do the second assessment on the laundromat, that'll help somebody that would probably want to buy it. They could get that done, apply for grant money to go in there and fix it up, turn it into whatever they want to do.
Even if we make $1 on the property, at least it's back in the system. Somebody believes in it enough to try and do something with it.
Well, the good thing about that one is directly across the corner from it is the police department. So that might help.
It turned it into a jail.
They might.
As far as the 20 acres, I'm curious as to why we purchased that. I can only, because we don't have one here that really knows that answer, I can only guess that it was purchased with the possibility of expanding the footprint of the county complex there. It doesn't make sense. It's actually pretty prime real estate as far as housing goes. So I don't know if that's something we should consider selling, developing, or encouraging development, or just keep it and do nothing. So if we were to sell it, I don't know how that process would go. Would that be some kind of a bid situation? Would that be listing it with a real estate company, and who would we pick? And things like that. I don't know how we would liquidate that property.
Chairman, member supervisors. So in a normal situation, you would have the property appraised, then it would go out for an auction. The starting amount would be 90% of the market value. You could also, by unanimous consent of the board, avoid the public auction and either sell it to another governmental entity or to another nonprofit for a specific purpose.
Do we know if this property connects to the Gila Community College property?
It does. Go ahead, James.
Mr. Chairman, that's what the purpose of the property was, is for the community college. Well, it may have been purposed for whatever reason, I don't know, but it was all one parcel, the college, and was all 40 acres that the county acquired. The county at one point was running the college in essence, and there was not a separation between the county and the college. And so at that point in time, there was the county allocated the property that the college is on for the college. And that's because it was, the college was the county and the county was the college. And so that's what that was used for. They used the 20 acres or the footprint that the college is on now. What remained was the additional 22 acres that is there. And could be used. There's a number of issues. It's been bandwidth of getting what a projected use of that would be, which could, in my vision, would probably best use as housing units, perhaps more high-density housing units.
Right, and how we accomplish that would be interesting. So the community college needs dorms. I think they have room for that, but I don't know how that would be accomplished. I would not be in favor of giving this away unless it included the development of a trade school or something like that with dorms and everything that could accommodate the school system. That would be a really big benefit to the county.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Christensen, a lot of organizations, governmental entities have in the last, it's been a number of years now, but they call them P3s or public-private partnerships, where we are able to, as a public entity, get with a private entity, come to an agreement where something can be developed in a commercial sense. The county may retain ownership of the property. It makes it a more financially able for a company to come in and do something that may not make as much financial sense, like higher density housing. May not make as much financial sense as being able to develop it into quarter acres or half acre lots and those kinds of things for high cost, high value homes.
See, I think that 20 acres is more valuable with that vision in mind than trying to liquidate it for mere dollars. Because we're looking probably at between $1 million and $2 million, not a lot of money. And then Marin's going to say we can't even use it to reduce our debt or anything because we're spending too much or something. So once we liquidate it, it's gone forever. So if we can encourage a deficit that exists in the area and enhance through a PPP, then I would really like that.
I don't disagree. Jessica, did you have something? No? So we looked at this one before we built the TCM building. We kicked it around and from all different directions. We talked to the city of Payson about going in and building a bigger complex, joining up, yada, yada, yada. But nothing was really coming together on any of it. My big push back then was, well, if we're going to do something other than in this 20 some odd acres, then why are we keeping this 20 some odd acres? It doesn't make sense to me for it just to continually sit there and sit there and sit there. I agree with you in the fact, and a couple reasons, is to actually sell it outright. We've missed the window for that. That should have been done a couple of years ago if we're really serious about doing it. Payson is, and everybody's hollering about housing, there's not enough housing, yada, yada, yada. I didn't know a lot about the public-private partnerships. James more recently has explained that to me, and that does sound promising. But I just think something needs to happen from my opinion. I don't know why we would just continue to let it sit there. We're not even getting tax money off of it, so it's earning us nothing. And it's been there for a long time before we got into office, so why continue it, James?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'll work with Michael and see if we can't put together a plan to have a discussion at least and some thoughts of where we go forward on that. The rest of the properties, and we can do this, we can get a list fairly easily, I believe, from the assessor's office of what are all the properties that we own in Gila County. Get that list and we can distribute that to you so you can have those for consideration. And like Jessica said, we just simply, well, we can need an appraisal and then just simply put them up for auction and divest of those. There's no reason that I could see of these individual parcels, for whatever reason we picked them up, that we just need to get divest. There's no reason the county should have those properties. We're not going to develop them and need to move them on.
Chairman, supervisors, now if you wanted to look into the purpose of why these properties were purchased, you can always line up the date of the deed of when they were purchased with the minutes to see what conversations took place during that board meeting. That's if you want to dig in that deep.
You know, I think for me personally, at this point in time, I think it's just we go on with it. Now, you did say we can go ahead and convey that property to the town of Winkleman, get that done?
Yes, there is authority for that.
All right, that'd be great. And then the rest of them, hopefully somebody would want to own them worse than we do.
Just to clarify that point, Supervisor, it would need to be unanimous consent of the board.
Sure. Tim, what do you think?
Well, I don't know, the 20 acres up in Payson, I don't really know where that's at. I haven't been there. But from my understanding, it's not flat.
So let me tell you, you know where you turn into go to the community college there?
Yeah.
It's from right there almost to Payson Concrete going off the hill, all along 260.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking is if it's not flat and it would be worth more flat or better use flat, why couldn't we do something with the material while we're working on if we're going to sell it or not? Because we're always trying to get the Forest Service to help us with material pits. If we've got one sitting right there, or you know, could that be a use for us for it now to increase the value of it and still use the material from it?
So I remember when we were talking about it and leveling out some areas for the TCM building, the new building. I don't know if it was Payson Concrete or Roy Hott or one of them had an interest in coming in there and leveling whatever we needed and then taking the excess material. The only thing I would say is that when I drive through like Chaparral Pines and down through there, people like that brush and they like those trees. So to go in there and to open something up, as much as I'm kind of inclined with you on that, it might hurt us too. Depends on what we're going to do with the property, I guess would be where the discussion would come.
It's just a work session.
Oh, I love it.
You know,
It's good.
Throw everything in that.
Yep.
Let's use it for material. Let's not. Let's build tree houses. You know, whatever.
Yeah.
Matter. But you know, unless we have a use for a specific property, I don't, you know, I don't see us being in the property business.
No, I'd rather see somebody else own this property and us collect the taxes off of it.
Yeah, create tax revenues for it in some ways. And some of those properties might be usable. There's people that are buying up some of the tax liens down there and and developing down in Hayden and Winkleman. They are, and so, you know, even at low interest, you know, any income off property taxes is better than us paying the taxes on it, because apparently we are paying taxes on these properties. I don't know.
I'm not sure how that works. I don't know either. But it's different than us taking a tax lien, you know, that's owned by the state but in care of the county. These are actually county-owned
Right.
property.
Yeah,
So,
understand that.
so I don't know if we're paying ourselves back on the taxes. I doubt it too. So, you know, so I'd just soon somebody else have them. What do you think?
On
You.
me, on the 20 acres, so I think that's a really great asset that we have, and we can sell it. It would be developed into high-end homes, not meeting the need of lower income people. I would like to see it, Gila, okay, so Gila community, because I've been digging into that a little bit, could expand their full-time student load by 50 to 100 if they had a place for people to live. That brings 50 to 100 more students into the community, creates more economy, everybody is happy. But they don't have dorms. And so my idea is we don't have enough of a trade school kind of education. We talk to the Wyoming trade school, whatever. We say, look, we've got this opportunity. Would you be interested in partnering with us? We're going to need to build some dorms, all of that. That would just develop that area into a real powerhouse destination kind of a place rather than a pass through. And I just think, personally, I'm excited about that thought. So,
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying as far as picking up more students, because housing, places to live in Payson is an issue, bad issue. You know, it's high priced. A lot of the long-term rentals have turned into short-term rentals, and not going to change. I don't see things changing. So you have that. You can't afford. I couldn't afford to buy a place in Payson. You know, it's costly. So I think there's different options. The thing I would say too is we have the room there to do some different things with it as well.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the trade school goes, I mean, that's, you know, there was big plans right across the road from there that hasn't materialized.
right.
And so I, for one, have never been real anxious to dive into that part of the education stuff because I don't understand it enough to do that. If there is somebody that's interested, you know, that could always be an option, I would say, that could come forward. But I think all in all, we need to look at doing something with it. That's my opinion.
Well, I would think, being that we brought this up in a work session, and work sessions are public information, and knowing the Payson Roundup, they're probably gonna let everybody know that we're interested
It'll be out in the
in doing something with that 20 acres, so we're liable to be getting some phone calls after today with people that are gonna make suggestions of what we need to do with that 20 acres.
pretty
You
sure.
know, you just never know, because like I say, you open it up to the public, and like I said, in the past, the Payson Roundup has been real good about expanding our thoughts to the public. So
Yeah, and I want to make
where
sure
that goes.
I'm not misunderstood as trying to duplicate what happened across the street.
That's a recovery, Steve.
No, but think about it. I mean, there's horseshoeing schools, HVAC schools, mechanic schools. There's just, we have a fabulous nursing program up there at Gila Community, and they can't expand because there's no place for these people to live. They can't even find just a dumpy trailer to live in. And so all of that is so necessary. And I think that as a nation, we've concentrated on higher education to the point where there's a lot of hands-on blue-collar skilled laborers that don't exist anymore. They just, they don't know how to turn a wrench. They don't know but they have a higher education that they can't get a job in. So,
Totally agree.
yeah.
All right, are we good on land? So we'll kind of dig around, see if there's any other land we own that we don't know about.
Yeah, that would be nice to know how much property Gila County actually does own, to help us make better decisions with what we're gonna do with what we have accumulated, before we were in office.
Cool. Okay, so we'll move on. Call to the public. Is there anybody in Payson for call to the public?
Nope, we're good.
Okay. How about YouTube? How many did we have on YouTube today? 36? Wow, it helps when you can hear. So that's cool. Good deal. Okay, nobody here. So moving on, updates. James, do you have any updates for us?
I will give one update that Senator Kelly distributed his list of congressionally directed spending that has made it to his list that he submitted to the congressional offices. Those 3 items that are on his list are: one, funding for the engineering and design of the Young Road, 512 Road, the $720,000 for the public safety vehicles that were requested up there are on the list for is being submitted to Congress for the process that, again, we won't know maybe for up to a year. And the third one is $333,000, which was what we submitted for one house. We'd submitted for $1 million request. $332,000 would provide funding for one house at the Veterans Retreat, a ADA compliant housing structure for the Veterans Retreat. So those three items are what were on Senator Kelly's. We haven't got Senator Sinema's list yet.
That's a new build.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Tim?
Just did a walkthrough on the construction of the bridge with Homero and the engineers, and it was good to watch that project and see it in progress. I think, Homero, we're like 30% complete now, 35 maybe? 30% complete at this point, and the water's going down, so we look like we'll be able to keep going for now and not get shut down. So that was a good project. Did a cleanup in Gila where I had a couple roll-offs. They delivered one at 8 o'clock in the morning, and long story short, by 11 o'clock they had filled 2 roll-offs and had enough stuff to probably fill 2 more. And on those I take my own truck and trailer so that I can put the tires and metal on my truck and trailer so they don't have to sort the roll-offs when they get back up there. But anyway, it was good. They appreciated it, and they sure took advantage of it because it didn't take long to get everything filled up and loaded to capacity.
Good.
So, other than that, that's about it. Normal meetings and things of that nature.
Steve?
Yeah, normal meetings and that, but the CSA Board of Directors meeting last week, and James was there in person. I was there on Zoom. Spoke some of the PSPRS retention and recruitment study, and they have formed an advisory board to help in that process. ASU, U of A, and NAU are all involved, and we may be called upon as a county to provide information like employee surveys or data collection, leadership interviews, things like that. So cooperation in that might help to find out what the problems are with PSPRS and seeking solutions to solve those problems. As far as the legislature goes, there was a report on that. So a few days ago was the 101st day in the legislative thing. Their longest, I think, was about 170 days about, and so anyway, they're not done yet. Governor Hobbs, though, has successfully made a record in her vetoes, 63 vetoes so far, and that's the highest of any other governor so far. And not a lot of bills just sailing through, but some of the bills that are still in consideration that may influence us would be things about the jails and mental health evaluation within the jails and how that's done now versus what they want to simplify it, and county attorneys and their interaction with schools as far as pro bono work with the schools, and that would not be a requirement but would be permissive or something like that. And so I'm not exactly sure how that bill would change things. But we wouldn't be required to represent the schools legally, I think is what the bill is doing. I don't know that we're required now to do that. And then other big issues like biosolids and water harvesting and different things like that. So anyway, they're fairly long meetings with a lot of information, but I thought I would at least report that that's what we talked about. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. So I don't have a lot. I'm leaving here, headed to Prescott. I'm gonna be there to present if need to the Board of Supervisors tomorrow on behalf of an NRCD district over there. So I'll be there tomorrow and then gone. But one of the things we did get word on was back in the day when we joined up on that continuum of care. And I think, Tim, it was about our second year into office, because we had the homeless issues and numbers and everything like that. Didn't really know where we were at the time, but it came to be apparent we needed to be on a member of the continuum of care through the state. Since then, like we heard Melissa talk about the other day, we have received a lot of dollars from that in support of homelessness and whatnot. Well, one of the more recent ones is going to be the warming center, and with that, I'm going to let Kathy tell you what's going to take place there.
Okay, Melissa called this morning just before we came in to advise Mr. Klein that due to all of his nagging for about a year and a half, that we did become part of the continuum of care at the state, which opens us up to a lot of money. So the warming center up there was evaluated by the Department of Housing, I think she said last week, and they will receive money on their own. It doesn't have to come through the county. So these different nonprofits, whatever, that are part of it, will be able to get funding on their own. She said all the warming center has to do is do like a one-page thing about what they'll do with the money, and then they'll get the money transferred to them. So that's as a direct benefit of the continuum of care. So that was good news. She was happy about that. She said it'll be quite a bit of money.
So that's a huge plus. You know, I remember when we joined up on that and became a part of that, it was still a lot of unknowns and didn't really know how much money, if any, really would ever get, but it has paid off and it's been a huge plus. So Steve, you can pass that along to the folks in Payson.
So last year we gave them $25,000. It came through Melissa Buzan's department, and you're anticipating it'll be more now?
Directly from the state.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Go right to them.
Okay, that's very needed. Thank you.
So, and that's all part of that continuum of care.
Well, I hope somebody follows through and they do that one-page report to receive it, because you can lead them to water, but you can't make them drink. So it's like, here it is, just somebody follow up. Do they do that one-page report and get it in before the deadline, if there is one?
So with that, I don't have anything else. Are we all good? If we are, James is leaving us, so the party's over, I guess. I'll adjourn this meeting. Thanks.